Hey, kid, can you hear me? Vincent Costello's voice was a low rumble, an instrument of command he hadn't used on a child in decades, if ever. He knelt beside the rigid bench at Gate 7 of his private airfield, a place normally reserved for oil sheiks and clandestine politicians, not for the small, still form of a little boy. The child didn't move. His tiny frame was curled into a tight ball on the cold, unforgiving surface of the seat, his arms wrapped around a threadbare stuffed elephant as if it were his only anchor in the world. A sheen of sweat glistened on his dark skin, and his cheeks were flushed a deep, alarming crimson. He was burning with fever. Vincent cast a sharp glance at Officer Miller, who stood a respectful distance away, his posture radiating unease. "How long has he been here like this?" "About 45 minutes, Mr. Costello. He just appeared on the security feeds. No guardian, no luggage, not even a ticket stub. He's completely alone." Vincent's gaze returned to the boy. His sneakers were mismatched, one a worn-out blue, the other a faded gray. A hole in one of his socks revealed a small toe. He couldn't be more than 5 or 6. The boy muttered something, a sound too faint to be a word, a ghost of a plea. His lips were chapped and dry, his breathing worryingly shallow. Vincent, a man whose life was a fortress of control and calculated distance, felt an unfamiliar crack in his armor. This wasn't a business complication or a rival's move. This was a child, abandoned and sick in the heart of his domain. He adjusted his cufflinks, a reflexive motion that brought him no comfort. "Get the medical team here now," he commanded, his voice regaining its usual firmness. "And lock down this entire wing. I don't want a single word of this getting out. No press, no whispers. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Miller moved with the urgency Vincent's orders always inspired. Left alone with the boy, Vincent reached out, his hand hesitating for a fraction of a second before he gently rested his palm on the child's forehead. The heat was scalding, a dry, dangerous fire. From the deep, locked vaults of his memory, a flicker of a past life emerged. A cramped apartment in New Orleans' French Quarter, the sultry notes of a saxophone drifting through an open window, and a woman's voice teasing him, calling him a stubborn fool. He shoved the memory back into the darkness where it belonged. 10 minutes later, the scene had shifted to the airfield's private infirmary, a state-of-the-art facility typically used for patching up his own men or providing discreet care for his more sensitive clientele. The little boy now lay on a sterile bed, an IV line snaking into his small arm. Nurses moved around him with quiet efficiency, checking his vitals, applying cool compresses to his feverish skin. "He's severely dehydrated," Nurse Evelyn murmured, her brow furrowed as she scribbled notes on a chart. "His temperature is just over 104. We need to bring it down, or we're looking at a possible seizure." Vincent stood by the door, arms crossed over his chest, his jaw a knot of tension. He should have been gone by now. He had people, an entire network, to handle situations like this. This was not his problem. He didn't do this messy, unpredictable human thing. "He said something," Evelyn added, her voice soft, "right before he lost consciousness again." Vincent's head snapped toward her. "What was it?" The nurse paused, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before she looked back at the boy. "He said, 'Don't leave me, Papa.'" The 2 words struck Vincent with the force of a physical blow. He turned away, his jaw clenching so hard he felt a muscle jump in his cheek. A coincidence? A delirious child, scared and alone, calling out for a father who wasn't there. It had to be. He stepped out into the pristine hallway, needing the cool, sterile air to clear his head. His right-hand man, Sal, was already there, a tablet in his hand, his expression serious. "We've reviewed the last 12 hours of security footage," Sal reported, his voice low. "It's clean, except for a 3-minute gap near Gate 4. The system rebooted itself right around the time the kid would have shown up." "Of course it did," Vincent muttered, the words laced with cold cynicism. "I also put a call in to Sarah," Sal continued. "She's on her way up from the main concourse. Said she might have seen the boy earlier this week." Vincent nodded curtly, his mind racing. He glanced back through the wide glass window of the infirmary door. The child was sleeping, the worn elephant tucked tightly under his chin, his breathing a little less ragged now. There was something in the boy's face, the soft curve of his cheeks, the stubborn set of his chin, that stirred a disquieting sense of recognition. God help him. It reminded him of someone. "Find out who he is," Vincent said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I want to know everything." "And if there's no record of him, boss?" Sal asked, his gaze steady. Vincent's voice became flat, devoid of emotion. "Then we create one." He turned back toward the room, and this time he didn't retreat. He walked back inside. A moment later, Nurse Evelyn entered, holding a thin file. "Mr. Costello, we ran his blood work and cross-referenced it with all the pediatric databases we have access to. We still can't find a match for a legal guardian in the system. But we did find something unusual." Vincent straightened up from his position near the bed. "What is it?" Evelyn hesitated, then passed him the file. "His blood type. It's AB negative. It's incredibly rare, found in less than 1% of the population. We only found 3 other blood donations in the entire state of Illinois in the last decade from someone with a matching profile." She took a small breath. "And, sir, one of them was yours." Vincent's own breath hitched. He looked down at the paper in his hand. There it was, circled in red ink. Blood type. AB negative. His own. He stared at the line, the black letters swimming before his eyes, trying to process the impossible implication. "I donated blood after my surgery 3 years ago," he said, his voice raspy. "It's in the National Registry." "It is," Evelyn confirmed. "But when a child's type is this rare, the system automatically flags for potential paternal matches. It's not definitive proof of paternity, of course, but it's a significant statistical anomaly." He slowly lowered the file, his eyes fixed on the small boy sleeping peacefully before him. The boy's features, which had seemed vaguely familiar before, now sharpened into focus. The line of his nose, the shape of his brow. He had never in his life looked at a child and entertained the thought that he might have played a part in bringing them into the world. Until this moment. "But he doesn't know me," Vincent said, the words spoken more to himself than to anyone else. Nurse Evelyn's voice was gentle. "He never mentioned a name, sir. All he said was that he got lost while he and his mother were looking for a new place to live. He said his mother told him they'd find someone who could help them, but they got separated." Vincent's voice was quieter now, stripped of its usual authority. "Did he say his mother's name?" "No, sir, not yet. He's still very disoriented from the fever and dehydration. But he's stabilizing. With some rest, he should be able to talk more clearly in a day or 2. He turned away and walked to the large window, the file clutched in his hand. Beyond the glass, the Chicago night was a tapestry of distant lights, and the private jets parked on the tarmac looked like sleeping beasts, waiting for his command to take to the skies. He felt just as frozen, just as grounded. He remembered the last time he had seen Imani Jones, 7 years ago. She had been a storm in his meticulously ordered life. Brilliant, fierce, and possessing a raw, disarming honesty that challenged his cynical world. She had walked away from him, from his money, from his protection. She had refused to be kept, refused to be owned, and had never once looked back. She had never mentioned a child, never sent a word, never asked for a thing. Was that her choice, or had something forced her hand? "Sal," he said, his voice sharp and focused as his assistant re-entered the room. "Yes, boss." "I want everything you can find on a woman named Imani Jones. Where she went after she left New Orleans, where she lived, who she worked for. Start 7 years ago, and don't miss a single detail." "Understood." "And Sal," Vincent added, his tone hardening. "This stays within my inner circle. No one else. Not my lawyers, not the council. Nobody. Is that clear?" "Crystal!" Vincent glanced back at the boy. His breathing had evened out completely now, the shallow gasps replaced by the slow, deep rhythm of sleep. He looked smaller, more fragile than before, but the blood didn't lie. AB negative. It was a rare, unbreakable thread. A thread that tied this boy to him. A thread that could unravel everything. He moved closer to the bed and gently pulled the thin blanket higher, tucking it around the boy's shoulders. The boy's eyelids fluttered open for a brief second, his dark eyes unfocused, then closed again. "Mama said, 'Find someone kind,'" he whispered, the words barely audible. Vincent's throat tightened. Did she say where she was going? The boy, whose name he still didn't know, murmured something else. Somewhere new. Start fresh. Then he was silent, lost to sleep once more. Vincent sank heavily into a nearby chair. The questions swirled in his mind, a vortex of doubt and a nascent, terrifying hope. Why hadn't Imani told him? Why would she raise their son in poverty and solitude? Was she running from him, or was she running from something far more dangerous? A soft knock came at the door. Sarah, the cleaning supervisor, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a perpetually worried expression, peered inside. "Mr. Costello?" He nodded. "Come in, Sarah." She entered quietly, her gaze immediately falling on the sleeping child. "That's him," she said softly. "I've seen him around Gate 4 a few times this past week. He never made any trouble, just sat on a little duffel bag, watching the doors like he was waiting for someone to walk through." Vincent's voice was calm, controlled. "Did you speak to him?" "Not really. Just once, I asked if he was lost. He told me he was waiting for his mama to come back from getting directions. I offered to call security, but he shook his head. Said he had to be brave, just like his mama taught him." Vincent nodded slowly. "Thank you, Sarah. That will be all." After she had gone, he let out a long, deep breath. For the first time in years, something inside him, something he thought had been calcified long ago, cracked open. He had built his empire on a foundation of logic, control, and calculated detachment. But no logic could explain how this child, carrying his blood and fragments of a past he had tried to bury, had ended up here, in his terminal, at his mercy. He looked down at the boy again. The child's hand was curled up under his chin, a perfect, trusting fist. "Leo," Vincent whispered, trying out a name. The boy didn't stir, but something deep within Vincent Costello did. The penthouse suite above Gate 1 was Vincent's sanctuary, a fortress of smoked glass and polished steel, suspended high above the airfield he had carved out of the Chicago landscape. Moonlight spilled across the gleaming mahogany floors of his private office, illuminating the tumbler of untouched scotch that sat on his desk. He hadn't slept. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, one hand clenching a small, tarnished silver locket. the other shoved deep into his pocket. On the desk, the file from the infirmary lay open. The boy's vitals, his blood type, his estimated height and weight, and the nurse's clinical notes. It was all there, cold and factual. But no fact could account for the profound, unfamiliar ache that had taken root in his chest, an ache that grew with every passing second he stared at the child's anonymous chart. He hadn't even gotten a name from the boy yet. He was just a match, a possibility, a ghost. Down below, the runways were a constellation of red and white lights, a silent network of paths leading everywhere and nowhere. Every hour, lives arrived and departed, a constant, indifferent flow. But somewhere in that vast, churning sea of humanity, his son had washed ashore. Alone, burning with a fever, his mother vanished. And Imani. What had she been running from? He opened the locket again. He'd found it tucked inside the boy's worn-out duffel bag, hidden in a side pocket. The photo inside was old, the colors faded. It showed Imani holding a newborn baby, her face serene, but her eyes held a weariness that went beyond fatigue. It was the look of a soldier, determined and braced for a long war. He stared at the image until the edges began to blur. A soft knock preceded Sal's entry. "Boss." Vincent didn't turn from the window. "Did you find her?" "We did," Sal confirmed. "Imani Jones relocated to Denver about 6 years ago. Worked odd jobs, mostly under the table. Waitress, bookkeeper. She changed her last name to Carter. Imani Carter. Probably to stay off the grid." He paused. "She died 2 years ago. Car accident just outside Boulder. Single vehicle. I got a copy of the police report. They ruled it an accident. No signs of foul play." Vincent's knuckles were white as he gripped the locket. "Next of kin?" "None listed. Just a boy, Leo, named in her emergency contacts." Sal's voice was quiet. "There's more. We spoke to a neighbor from her last apartment complex. Said Imani had been packing up, getting ready to move. Told the neighbor she wanted a better life for her son. A fresh start somewhere in the Midwest? They left in a hurry. Didn't leave a forwarding address." Vincent finally turned, his face a mask of stone. "She was coming here." "It looks that way. Coming to find you." Sal hesitated. "It's not entirely clear. The neighbor said Imani never mentioned you by name, but she kept a box hidden under her bed. It was full of old newspaper clippings about you. Your business deals, speeches, airport expansions. Theet." That revelation hit him harder than the news of her death. "She never told Leo about me." Sal shook his head. "From what we can gather, no." Vincent rubbed his forehead, a wave of something akin to vertigo washing over him. "So this child, my son, grew up his entire life without knowing I existed. And now he's an orphan." "No," Sal said, his voice firm but respectful. "He's not." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Vincent walked over to the sprawling leather sofa and sat down, the springs groaning under his weight. He stared at the intricate patterns of the Persian rug. I've missed 6 years of his life. His first word, his first steps, his first day of school. "You didn't know, boss." "I should have," Vincent growled, the self-recrimination raw and bitter. Sal remained silent. What was there to say? Vincent Costello, the man who anticipated every move, who saw threats before they materialized, had been utterly blind to the single most important event of his life. The silence was broken by the sharp buzz of the intercom on his desk. Nurse Evelyn's voice, crisp and professional, filled the room. "Mr. Costello, he's awake, and he's asking for you." Vincent was on his feet in an instant. The infirmary was dim, bathed in the soft, rhythmic glow of the heart monitor and the faint light from a small lamp in the corner. Leo was sitting up in the bed, propped against a pillow. He was still pale, but his eyes were clear and alert. The stuffed elephant rested beside him, its trunk frayed and one of its button eyes hanging by a thread. He looked impossibly small, breakable. Vincent entered the room slowly, his footsteps muffled by the polished floor. "Hey, Leo!" The boy turned his head, his gaze cautious, but filled with a child's unfiltered curiosity. "Hi. How are you feeling?" "Better," he said, then paused. "The nurse gave me some apple juice and toast." Vincent managed a small smile. "That's a good sign." Leo studied him for a long moment, his dark eyes taking in Vincent's expensive suit, his severe expression. "You're the man from the bench." "I am." He hesitated again, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Are you someone important?" Vincent's smile was faint, tinged with irony. "Some people seem to think so, but not to the person who matters most right now." "Who's that?" "You." The boy blinked, unsure how to respond to that. Vincent moved closer, pulling a chair up to the side of the bed. "Can I ask you a question?" He nodded. "Do you remember how you got to the airport?" Leo looked down at the frayed elephant in his lap. "Mama said we were going to find a new home. We stopped in a big city, and she went to ask someone for directions. I waited on a bench, just like she told me to. I waited and waited, but she never came back." Vincent felt a cold knot twist deep in his gut. "Did she ever talk about me?" Leo shook his head. "No. She just said that when we got to the right place, someone kind would be there to help us." "I'm glad I was here," Vincent said, his voice softer than he intended. Leo reached into the small, worn backpack that lay on the bedside table and pulled out a folded, crumpled piece of paper. He held it out to Vincent. He took it and carefully unfolded it. It was a child's drawing, rendered in bright, clumsy crayon strokes. It depicted a tall man in a dark suit, standing next to a little boy, holding a stuffed elephant. Above the figures, written in shaky, uneven letters, were the words, "When I find him, I won't be alone anymore." Vincent couldn't speak. He felt as if the air had been punched from his lungs. The boy looked up at him, his expression innocent and heartbreakingly direct. "Do you know where my mama is?" Vincent took a slow, steadying breath. "Yes, Leo, I do." "Is she okay?" He paused, the lie dying on his lips, the truth a shard of glass in his throat. "No, son," he said, his voice cracking on the last word. "She passed away a while ago. I'm so sorry." Leo's lower lip trembled, but he didn't cry. Not yet. He just gave a small, solemn nod and looked away, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the window. Vincent reached out, his large hand gently covering the boy's small one. "I didn't know about you," he said, the confession feeling woefully inadequate. "But now that I do, I promise you, I'm not going anywhere." Leo turned to look at him again, his eyes searching Vincent's face. "You promise?" "I promise." The boy leaned against Vincent's arm, a silent, fragile gesture of trust. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the tarmac. Vincent closed his eyes, the locket still a heavy weight in his pocket. For the first time in his adult life, he felt the gravity of something real, something that mattered more than power or territory or fear. He had found his son, and he would let no one and nothing take him away. The executive dining room on the top floor of the Costello Airfield Administrative Building had never hosted a child. It was a sanctum of power, a place of hushed conversations over espresso and multi-million-dollar deals, all conducted to the smooth, unobtrusive sound of instrumental jazz. But that morning, the polished silence was broken by the soft, shuffling sound of a 6-year-old's footsteps in oversized hospital socks. Leo walked beside Vincent, his small hand clutching two of the man's large fingers. He seemed dwarfed by the sterile grandeur of the hallway, the hospital gown he wore slightly too big, his stuffed elephant clutched under one arm like a loyal bodyguard. His short, curly hair had been gently combed by Nurse Evelyn, and while his cheeks were still pale, a hint of color had returned. The few staff members they passed stared, not with overt rudeness, but with the wide-eyed curiosity that accompanied any disruption in Vincent Costello's meticulously ordered universe. No one dared to ask a question. "Is this where the important people eat?" Leo asked, his voice a small whisper. Vincent looked down at him, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Supposedly, but the food's not nearly as good as it looks." "Is it better than toast and apple juice?" "Much better." He held open the heavy glass door, and Leo entered with the cautious solemnity of a soldier stepping onto foreign soil. He clambered onto a sleek, high-backed stool,